So depending on what other wargaming systems that you enjoy, or depending on what other systems you have played, making the jump to Battletech, one of the interesting things that we see, and this is building on a comment with some of the variants and some of the aspects of Battletech, many wargaming systems are WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And we see this for two reasons. I'm going to pull in, as an example to frame it, Chain of Command, World War II Historicals, fantastic rule set. Fantastic rule set. And on the opposite side, Warhammer 40K, just the ultimate sci-fi kind of miniatures, roll dice, kind of create that grimdark aspect. And both of these games are WYSIWYG, but for somewhat different reasons. So Chain of Command, World War II, the only reason I'm playing historical Germans is because I love tanks. I want late war, big tanks. I want lots and lots and lots of tanks. And the tanks need to be WYSIWYG. There's a big difference between a Panzer III and a Tiger tank. So you need that aspect, and also the size is important because we're playing on a true wargaming table, true line of sight. You look at the early Panzers; they're big, but they're tiny. Then we look at some of the late war tanks. These things are monsters. So in terms of how they interact and how they hide, WYSIWYG is important. There's also aspects of Chain of Command that when you deploy, units are hidden. You'll have a marker on the table. You as my opponent know that something is there. So there's a marker on a farmhouse. You know something's there. Could be a tank. Could be infantry. Could be a machine gun team. Something is there. When you get closer, or when I activate and when I deploy, you put the models down. Well, it needs to be WYSIWYG because I'm not going to say, oh yeah, look, I had a Tiger tank in the barn just waiting. I'm going to put that tank down in the house, in the barn, and you need to assess and know. So from that historical perspective, it needs to have that. On Warhammer 40K, WYSIWYG is also important because the different weapon profiles in the game and the different units and figuring out heroic characters where they are. Now, that's not to say people don't play with proxies, or you don't say to a friend, hey, this group of, this unit is really another type of unit. I mean, you can do that, but for the most part, it's WYSIWYG because that enforces the game and that helps inform your opponent of tactics. Well, now we jump over to Battletech, and this is something that's interesting, pulling in the community, but also possibly the pressure of going WYSIWYG. I don't see it happen, but I'm going to kind of put that narrative out there and see what you guys think with the feedback. So you have the primary mech configuration. And in the Battletech narrative over time, you'll see, hey, here's like when this mech rolled off the assembly line, this is the stats of it. And maybe it has those stats, maybe it has those weapons, but over time, new variants were created. Either they were improved upon, or perhaps for production reasons, they were downgraded, or even just different tech levels supporting it. A great example is the Archer. One of the Archer variants that I love to play is the rocket launcher variant. You know, hundreds and hundreds of unguided rockets. It's downgrading the long-range missile 20 packs to just dumbfire rockets, and I just alpha strike everything. So in the narrative, there's this idea that you have the Archer, but the tech level, depending on the border worlds and where it is, they've actually downgraded some of the internal weapons. So you'll see for a mech, especially a lot of the bug mechs and a lot of the very popular mechs, primary, and then 4 or 5 or 6 different variants, different locations. Another great example, the Charger. The Charger itself just has lots and lots of small lasers. I usually play a Charger for the lulls. If it's in a bigger game, it just has to do something fun. It just has to do something interesting, just for the sake of honor. But the Charger as a recon, heavy-ish, assaulty, maximum tonnage mech, when you're like, look, the battle value's low, but I could do the same thing with a bug mech. But as soon as you take that tonnage, that raw tonnage, and change the Charger into one of the variants with the autocannon and lasers, it becomes a beast. It becomes, well, a full-on, assault type mech. WYSIWYG. WYSIWYG for Battletech. Now, I won't say that how I play Battletech is how everybody plays Battletech. I've done my share of traveling up and down the East Coast, playing in events and meeting other players, and there's always some house rules or some expectations or different interpretations. That's to be expected. But I've never seen anyone in Battletech, and in the comments, I could be wrong, let me know. I've never seen anyone that has enforced WYSIWYG. I've never seen it. So this idea of if you have a Marauder model, I'm plastic Marauders. I was so close to going on Robotech just for that. Besides avoiding that whole headache, seeing the kits of how the Robotech models are built, I couldn't bring myself to do it. But finally, we're going to have a plastic Marauder. If you have that Marauder plastic, it represents whatever variant you're playing. If it's the primary, if it's a secondary, if it's a custom mech, that miniature represents it. Battletech is not true WYSIWYG in terms of the unit has to have the exact configurations. Now, could you take a Demolisher tank and say it's a Bulldog? I mean, you could, but generally speaking, I think that's where the line is drawn. For Battletech, the unit that it represents is supposed to be the unit that it represents. And then from there, the variants, you don't need to have it. So I've never seen true WYSIWYG enforced. I've never really heard it in the Battletech community. I don't think it could be, because now if you want to play a different Marauder variant, you need those variants. They don't make the miniatures for it. You got to kit bash it. I can't see. Now this leads into the next question. I can't see Catalyst. Games Workshop is like, here's your kit, and we're going to give you all these variants to build out. So you either build the primary variant of the squad or the unit or the tank, or you magnetize everything. I mean, back in the day, I made a killing off rare earth magnets. Or you just buy multiple kits, or you're forced to buy multiple kits because you want something specialized. Games Workshop has that just absolutely nailed down. When we look at the perspective of historicals, Chain of Command World War II, there's a lot of, again, playing late war Germans, historical Germans just for the tanks. There's a lot of tanks, but there's not really that much diversity because these things are being produced in mass. So it's not like Warhammer 40K. Battletech, with so many variants, I can't see a company, Catalyst, or if they passed it on and ramped up their production capabilities, making all the variants, because you would have so much stock just sitting there doing nothing. Now, Ironwind does have some of the more popular variants. I have seen some Battletech players, some mech warriors, where you have your favorite mech. You're like, look, I'm always playing the Archer. I'm always playing this type of mech. And you always play the variant. So I have seen some people purchase, use, create, kit bash, green stuff, a variant simply because they play it so much they want it represented on the table. An example is the Locust variant with the short-range missiles, the two tubes on either side. That's the type of Locust that I play. So all of my Locusts, with the exception of the Game of Armored Combat Locust, they're not stock. I have those miniatures simply because that's what I always play, and it was like, hey, this is worth investing. But if I was going to switch back and forth, I don't know if I would. So your thoughts on true WYSIWYG in Battletech? It's never fazed me. It's never bothered me. I've never considered it. And again, this is coming from someone that plays historicals, someone that plays Warhammer 40K, which is true WYSIWYG. So this is where you buy multiple kits, multiple things. And I just can't see it implemented in the Battletech community. And I would never demand it as a player, because it would squash the diversity and it would squash the fun of a lot of these different mechs and machines and tanks exploring variants, not to mention just those of you in the mech lab creating different variants off of your favorite mech. We certainly don't want to stifle that creativity and that narrative in such a big, rich universe. So in the comments, your thoughts. I'm gonna tap into the Battletech community here. In your community, big or small, multiple players, just you and your friend, whatever it is, do you enforce WYSIWYG? Do you see WYSIWYG? Do you try to do all the mech variants. And could you see Battletech becoming that, growing that out? I don't think we have the fan base to do that, especially with 3D printing. But that's the story. That's a tale. That's a story for another time.